Welcome to A Window on SAHMRI, where we take you inside South Australia's independent not-for-profit health and medical research institute. Each episode, we get to know the people driving our life-changing research, getting into what motivates them personally and how their work is delivering a brighter, healthier future for all.
Maria, what first got you interested in science and pursuing science?
Well, I guess I was always interested in how things worked and asked a lot of questions. And when I started a science degree at the University of Melbourne, just got really interested in, particularly towards the end of the degree, how things worked around nutrition and nutritional metabolism. And I guess that was probably the spark that led to the whole idea of nutritional research, which is where I think I've ended up.
And what was it about that particular area that captured your interest?
I guess it was more around how things work, the nutritional requirements, and then how, the complexity of what one eats, can actually have such a profound impact on health.
And how did those early experiences that you had at university shape your approach to science?
It's actually interesting because I also of Mediterranean background, and food has always been really important in our family, and people have been quite picky and about food. And it was probably also the time that the Mediterranean diet and issues around the Mediterranean diet were becoming quite important. And as I got more involved in nutrition, so after I left Melbourne, I came to Adelaide to do a degree in nutrition and dietetics, thinking that that was actually the path that I wanted to pursue. And at that time, the sort of so-called nutritional experts were thinking about the Mediterranean diet as a very low-fat diet, and which is definitely not the experience that I had at home, where you sort of think, well, that can't be right because there's a lot of olive oil that's used. A lot of the yogurts and cheeses and stuff that are used are quite high fat. And in my mind, it was always about a moderate to high fat diet rather than a very low fat diet. And I guess as things have moved on, it actually has shifted to being more a moderately accepted to be a moderately to high fat diet. But it was actually that disconnect between the so-called science and what was actually, the experience in practice. And I think people just assumed that I'd end up working in the Mediterranean diet, but it was just something, and I don't know whether it was a cultural cringe thing or something, but I sort of moved back and became really interested in what was actually happening in paediatrics. I got offered a scholarship to do a PhD after I finished in nutrition and dietetics, and I had really engaged and loved my research project during that postgraduate degree. So I thought, well, you know what, I will actually progress into research. And it was, strangely enough, again, about fats and fatty acids, which has sort of become, I guess, my nutritional love in the science world. And it was just so interesting for me at the time to understand and try and get to the bottom of how these nutritional requirements of these special omega-3 fats that were considered essential and how they actually worked and their importance in how the brain develops and sight and vision was actually part of a PhD was. Now 35 years later, still working on doing that. And it's actually the whole career has actually been about how these particular fatty acids work and what the specific requirements are for babies, whether they're born at term or born early or in pregnancy, and their health effects. The whole thing originally was around neurodevelopment, but as time has passed, we've only just started to solve the neurodevelopment question. that there's been many other offshoots. And I guess, I'm rather proud of the fact that over that 35-year period, we were the first people to publish in term-born babies how visual signals change with the supplementation of these fatty acids. That led to changes in the way infant formulas are produced, because in the early 90s, they were very depleted in these fatty acids. Breast milk had a full complement of these fatty acids and was probably one of the reasons why breastfed babies tended to do better than formula-fed babies. There's now mandates nationally and internationally of minimum levels of these fatty acids that go into infant formulas. We've now worked out that preterm babies need more because they miss the in utero supply. And just in the last few years, the team has really shown that, if you can meet what these babies would get in utero, their IQs will improve out at the age of 5 by, 4 to 5 points, which is actually making them closer to what you would expect of a term-born baby, given that these very preterm babies have IQs that are 10 to 12 points lower. That's actually something that hasn't been able to be. There's been no intervention in the neonatal unit that could actually achieve such a difference, probably for about 30-odd years, maybe longer. So that's actually been a very long, slow journey, but I'm actually really proud of it because there's been a lot of great collaborations along the way, a lot of great capacity building, and the people that are now leading the team have been people that I've worked with for many years, and it's just so heartening to see those leaders, those new leaders, step up, and I'm really excited to see where they'll take the field next.
I think that's fascinating. That's something that's emerged from your cultural background, where you first started thinking about fats all those years ago, and that thread has continued on through all those decades and now turned into the omega-3 pregnancy screening program, which is a revolutionary program that's now reducing preterm birth in South Australia and could be adopted around the world. Given that that thread's gone all the way along and other things have been achieved as well, of course, but it's turned into that level of translation. How much satisfaction do you draw from that?
To sit back, when you're immersed in it, you don't think about it too much. But when you sit back, it's something that I am proud of, and it's great to see the adoption. It's wonderful to see the interest internationally, and most importantly, for the families and the children, the parents who have been involved in the studies and the programs, and see their engagement has been wonderful. The big thing, I think, as I alluded to earlier, is actually the legacy is essentially in the people. So it's, in people like, Karen Best and Jackie Gould and Tom Sullivan and Lisa Yelland and, the people who are now actually the ones who are going to take the next steps and lead the next part of the program and see what wonderful directions it goes in.
Because research is all about legacy in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
We carry something forward and then you build on the shoulders of giants, and one thing leads to another, and it's part of the beauty of it, because you would have had your own mentors.
Well, that's right. So I definitely stood on the shoulders of giants locally and internationally. Big special shout out to Bob Gibson, who I ended up marrying. But, he really was the lipid biochemist who who knew the biochemistry, and together, with knitting together the clinical work and my dietetics background, have managed to do some wonderful work together. And as you say, someone once said that, in health and medical research or in medicine, we get taught a bunch of things, and, it's only half of those things that will end up to be true, and the other half will probably be disproven. And when you're actually
half's probably generous, really.
And when you're working in it, you don't know which half is right. So, and you mentioned legacy, and that actually is the thing, is that, you do this work, you try and do it the best you can. And that's the key thing about research. It is actually about the process and the quality of the process that will get you as close to the truth, if you like, or the answer as possible. And passing on that love of the process and that appreciation and taking pride in doing something well, regardless of what the outcome ends up being, good, bad or indifferent, whether you prove your hypothesis or not, then you actually get the most, hopefully the best answer on which to build the next piece of the puzzle and the next piece of the puzzle.
And this is a puzzle that you're very proud of, as you said, that you've put a huge amount of effort into it. It's your life's work. When you see people like Karen and Jackie and some of the other names you mentioned there, and the attitude with which they go about it, how does that make you feel about the future?
Yeah, look, I think it's the future's in good hands, and I think my role now is to support as best I can and make sure that the best resources are available for those people to actually do the best work possible, and to continue to be, hopefully even more rigorous than I was taught to be.
Yeah, and that's not just in your program, that's institute-wide.
Yeah, institute-wide. So I guess I think about, that little program as the microcosm, but, how, then since taking on the role as executive director in the last 14, 15 months.
Time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun. Is how do we actually institute, and there's amazing pockets of great work that happens in SAHMRI of equal or better quality. How do we actually, though, imbue that ethos across the whole institution, and that level of robustness, questioning, integrity, and actually sheer love of the science and the process.
And you were there right at the beginning with SAHMRI. What was the vision back then?
Yeah, I started at SAHMRI in July 2013 as the inaugural theme leader for what is now SAHMRI Women and Kids. At that time was Healthy Mothers, Babies and Children. And it was a very exciting time because the institution was being built from the ground up. And there was a fair bit of freedom to actually pursue one's passion and be able to and there was a sense of being able to make a real difference. And I'm extremely grateful for that freedom and the ability to actually continue. So when I came to SAHMRI, I came from another research-only institution called the Child Health Research Institute, and the program had a relatively good foundation, but SAHMRI provided an amazing springboard to actually grow it hugely, to establish a whole new theme. And one of the things that I'm particularly proud of was the establishment of ACRA, which is the Aboriginal Families and Communities Health Alliance. And, that program is going from strength to strength and is kicking really amazing goals. So, the ability to think about actually what was missing and what's important to be able to do, and have the freedom to be able to seed that was quite amazing. And I think there's lots of examples like that within SAHMRI.
A lot's changed in that 11 years. What's it been like to see the Institute evolve and become what it is today?
Great. So yes, you say a lot has changed. It's gotten a lot bigger. When I first started, I think I knew most of the people in the institution. I don't know everybody in the institution now. And that's sort of been one of the things that has been really, I've found and had a lot of fun in the last 2 or 3 months running the Hive Mind sessions, which, really are trying to bring together on a weekly basis a cross-section of people across the institution, regardless of where they are and where they work. And I think of all the sessions we've never had a group of people that have that everybody's known each other. So it's been great to be able to facilitate some connection with other people, but also for me to hear directly from people across the whole institution about what they love about SAHMRI and what needs to be improved, because as you grow, not everything's perfect. The thing that people talk about, which I echo about being great about SAHMRI, has been the flexibility, the ability to adapt work and be able to manage work in a flexible way has been a consistent theme that people appreciate, and I've certainly appreciated over the years. And we just need to continue to be able to protect that. But the beauty of being in a research-only institution where you can stay focused on research and build the collaborations that you need to build in a flexible, agile, least bureaucratic way possible, I think has been core to SAHMRI's success.
And SAHMRI is built around research translation. What does being a research-only institute do for research translation?
Well, I think the community and the health services, university partners become increasingly important, particularly the health services. And I think we need to remember that as a health translation institution, the work that we do always has an end game in mind, is actually about improving the health or the health outcomes of people, or making healthcare and health systems better. So the partnerships become most important if we are going to be able to be relevant and make sure that whatever research we're doing, we're asking the appropriate questions. That's with our clinical partners and our consumer partners. But importantly, that whatever we come up with is actually going to be able to fit into the health system and not into existing health systems and health services. So those partnerships become absolutely core. Increasingly, our clinical partners, our health system is increasingly burdened. So being able to have the luxury to drive the research with the partners and actually carry a responsibility for making sure that it is relevant becomes hugely important, simply because not that our partners, they're too busy needing to do their priority work, which is looking after patients.
We have some of the most brilliant researchers in the world. Why do they want to be at SAHMRI?
I think it's that. It is the issue of, you have the partnerships and you have the luxury to work exclusively in research. I know our clinical partners, if they have clinical appointments, the time they have at SAHMRI is their research time. Our university partners, it is time that is free from teaching, which actually then is a core business of the university sector. So,
because of course half the time is applying for grants.
Yes,
well.
that's right. And I think that's something we generally need to do as a sector in terms of, trying to think about how we have things, make things not as competitive. Obviously, it is a very competitive system. Applying for grants is not always a bad thing, because what I've learned over the years is that, when you are really forced to focus and write a grant, that actually is your research strategy for the next 2 or 3 years, because you're saying this is what I want to do, and you put the energy and effort into, doing your strategic plan about what research you're going to do over the next 2 or 3 years. So that's actually one of the ways of thinking about grants.
And it's worth it if the grant's successful.
And it's worth it if the grant's successful. But when the success rates were of the order of 20%, that was, a delight. Now that the success rates are low and we have many more deadlines, it is a burden. And we do, as a sector, have a challenge to see, well, how are we going to look after our early mid-career scientists and bright stars and make sure that they can stay in research rather than go and find other careers elsewhere. And I think that's a sector-wide issue. Actually, it's an issue that's going to be heavily discussed at AHMRI later in the month. So AHMRI is the Australian Association of Medical Research Institutes, and is an important forum for research-only institutions to make sure that we can actually look after health and medical research. And one of the topics that I'm going to be involved with is how do we attract and retain bright stars in an increasingly competitive environment in Australia.
And it seems to me that SAHMRI punches well above its weight, and we do have a lot of successful grant applications, and we have a huge amount of research that is done and then is translated into tangible results. And that's part of what makes SAHMRI unique and brilliant in my view. What do you put that down to, SAHMRI's success in its infancy? I mean, we're essentially a startup. We haven't been around for all that long, but we've achieved a lot. Why do you think that is?
I think it's about the people and the culture. It's the people who drive the work. So the people need to be supported. And I think the reason why they stay and thrive is the culture that we have that's relatively open, collaborative. People take interest in each other's work. And that's something that I think we've got to work hard to maintain as we've gotten bigger, to make sure that we don't have silos that just get created because of size. And we do, and it is difficult. We have groups that are separated by geography, whether they're out at Pearl or Flinders or the women's and children's, not everybody's together. And that makes it more difficult for people to bump into each other and know what each other's doing, so that we can, you might make, the leap from A to B to C, but then to be able to make that quantum leap to J, you often need that interface, that outside the box thinking, where you're actually talking to truly interested colleagues from different areas. And I think sometimes looked at, say, the work that Tim Hughes and Deb White have done in cancer and just taken a lot of thought from how things have gone from, say, the lab to the clinic, back to the lab, back to the clinic, that sort of flip-flop, which has been really important learning, in my area as well as others, in terms of being able to drive change that is truly science-based, that takes important quantum leaps forward.
And how has becoming SAHMRI's leader deepened your appreciation for the Institute and changed your perspective?
Look, I think that I've been incredibly heartened by the theme leader group as well as the executive group. I think there is a real depth of passion, of belief, of love of what we do at SAHMRI. As a researcher and a theme leader, I don't think I appreciated that deep commitment is equivalently there from the researchers as well as the people who work in the support roles, whether that be finance or legal, or some of our best supporters are people inside our corporate services.
It strikes me that people feel like they're a part of something at SAHMRI.
That's right. And I think the more we can make the connections so that everybody appreciates that it is a greater team, then the better and more successful we will end up being. Having said all of that, success in science is also about focus. So making sure that we are continually refining our focus and making sure that we're investing and putting energy into the areas that are successful and other areas that are have good direction into the future and have good pipelines for science and for people become increasingly important. And, as we've all learnt to appreciate, things do change over time. So looking at what we need to be focusing on in the future, where SAHMRI is going to be in the next 10 years is equally important in terms of where the future success is going to be, and what's important for the state is where SAHMRI needs to locate itself for the next 10 years and work through those teenage years and make sure that we're a successful institute in 10, 20 years' time.
And looking that far ahead, all things going well, what would you like to see SAHMRI become?
I think SAHMRI has got strong foundations in translational research. I think SAHMRI is perfectly positioned to essentially be the research and development arm of the health system. I think the partnerships with our university colleagues and the health system is where a lot of our energy needs to go. Obviously, there's a lot of change in the sector too, with two of the universities merging. So that'll change our partnerships with the university sector going forward. The key thing for us is that we remain a research-only institution and finding ways to enhance those partnerships going forward. I think it's probably fair to say they started strongly and maybe have wavered a little, but we need a major reset of our partnerships with both the health system and the university sector.
Do you miss research?
Look, I still have an investigator grant, so I try my hardest to be as involved as I can in research, direct research, rather than research administration. And and that's really the driver and the passion. And I feel that I do like to, I still probably put in about a day and a half of direct research a week. And I think that's actually important because it keeps me grounded in terms of what are the issues that researchers are facing, and probably keeps me a bit sane.
Do you look forward to that day?
Well, it's never on a single day, so it's all pushed in between things. But it is actually kind of fun to be able to balance the two, and hopefully there'll be an opportunity to continue to make a contribution and deliver and continue to deliver good science for South Australia that really does have global impact. Doesn't necessarily need to be stuff that I do, but to help put things in place to help others do it.
Did you envision being a leader on the kind of stage that you are now when you were a more junior researcher? Did you ever imagine that your career would turn into this and you would actually be largely away from research and tending to everything else?
Look, absolutely not. When I first started, I thought, well, gee, you always go through those doubts. Are you really going to make it? And I think, my backup plan in science when, I wasn't going to get that next fellowship and I wasn't going to do this was I was going to run a shoe shop. That was my backup plan. But, and I thought, well, gee, if I end up running a great research program, I didn't think that I would do much more beyond that. But to find myself with huge support from the people inside SAHMRI to take on the executive director role has been a huge honour, quite humbling, and makes me want to do my absolute best and damnedest to achieve the best possible outcome for the people inside SAHMRI.
And what does SAHMRI and SAHMRI thriving mean to you? I know you put a lot of effort into it.
Look, I really, because largely of my own experience working in research-only institutions that straddle the health system in Australia, really believe that is actually one of the best ways for us to be able to continue to do and deliver relevant research that improves health. And I think SAHMRI's got a hugely important role to play. And that's where the energy needs to go.
And if we don't have that, if we don't have SAHMRI and we don't have this translational research coming out all the time, what impact does that have on society? Where does that leave the public?
Well, there are obviously other institutions that do that too, but to be able to have SAHMRI where it actually is a concentration of that, I think not having SAHMRI would actually hugely dissipate that effort and would take much longer to achieve the outcomes that SAHMRI's achieved in a short space of time. If I just look personally at my own work, you talked about the test and treat program. When I joined SAHMRI, we were only just starting the trial that ultimately resulted in the major publications that then resulted in the change in the practice guidelines and now the implementation. So that's happened from the time we had the data was in 2019, 2020, within 5 years, we've got a program that's been implemented statewide and that is being mirrored in other places around the world and with international guidelines. That would normally take up to 17 years. So if we can continue to have institutions that are so focused on health translation to shorten that time to get the best evidence-based practices into health systems as quickly as possible is going to be the best way to help our society and our population going forward.
Because from the community's perspective, that's what it's all about when you come down to brass tacks. It's give me the drug now, give me the program now, not endless studies talking about it, but actually when we drill down to it, what's at the other end of it for me. And SAHMRI just plays such a significant role in shortening that time span and giving people what they need sooner.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Well, I'm glad you didn't end up having a shoe shop, although I'm sure they would have been some very shiny shoes, but I think your energy is probably better spent in your current role.
Thanks, Kel.
Never too late.
Never too late. Well, I had thought about maybe, a SAHMRI one in the foyer.
Well, we can try. We can try anything at SAHMRI. That's the point, isn't it? Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about SAHMRI and the researchers working to build a brighter, healthier future for you and your family, head to sahmri.org.au.